Okay, yeah, we're good. All right. Well, thanks for being here to our Becoming a Contagious Christian, our Soul Winners class here at Loco. For those of you tuning in, we are on our second week of our study of how to be better witnesses, be better evangelists. And so, like I said the first week, if you were here, we're going to start off in a word of prayer. And I'm going to need somebody to volunteer. So, who wants to pray for us? Let's get started. Thank you, Judy.
Dear Heavenly Father, I just thank you for today and for your many blessings. Lord, I just thank you for Zack and his zeal to serve you and to teach our church and prepare us for what you would have us do in the best way possible. I just pray that you'll continue to help him as he study and help him to retain those things that he needs to pass on to us. Just open our hearts and prepare us for your message. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. All right. So, last week we studied an important formula. It's written up there at the top of your page of your handout. HP plus CP plus CC equals MI. That's kind of a confusing little formula we have there, but this is a way that we can have the most maximum impact on those around us, right? Because that's the goal of this class, is to be able to, those within our sphere, we need to seek them out. We need to be able to communicate the message in order to have the most maximum impact, that is, to lead them to the Lord, to a salvific faith, or to simply help another believer through a difficult situation. And so, what's the very first one there, the HP? What's that stand for? Anybody remember?
High potency.
High potency, right? Okay. What's the second one? CP?
Close proximity.
Close proximity. Remember, the salt, in order for it to have an effect, it has to be close to what it's intending to affect. And then CC?
Clear communication.
Clear communication. Okay, so you get high potency, close proximity, and clear communication. Those three together will give you the maximum impact, the best impact that you can have on another person in the faith. All right. So this week we're going to be looking at the high potency. High potency. Somebody describe that for us. Somebody who was here last week, describe high potency.
To have a strong influence.
Strong influence.
Be pure without impurity.
Okay. Yeah.
To seek the Lord for sanctification as you.
Yeah. To basically live out your faith, right?
Let them see it.
Yeah. Let people see it. And I'm glad that you use that because we are going to be talking about that a little more in depth as we walk through what high potency is. And again, this is all taken from Becoming a Contagious Christian by Bill Hybels and Mark Mittelberg. Amazing book. If you just want a simple approach to how to better share your faith, I would strongly recommend you read this book. It was recommended to me by my mentor to read, and it's been a blessing to my library ever since I got it. So definitely check that out if you'd like. And it's going to be a really great tool to use in the future, and especially because he uses actual real-world examples and illustrations for how these things are actually played out. And so that's why I like it so much, is because it gives you practical advice and stories of how it actually has worked before. All right, so there are three components of high potency. Three components of high potency. For those of you that are watching live on Facebook or watching a recording of this, the handouts will be available on our website, fbcloco.com. Go on there to the resources tab, and I'll be adding those tonight. That way you can follow along with this. So go print that out and come back here, and we'll be able to pick up. High potency, there are three components to high potency. The first one is authenticity. Authenticity. Being authentic, right? It's this idea of actually walking the walk, living out your faith. being authentic. The second is compassion. To be potent, to be highly potent, we need to have compassion. That is love. And the third, and probably the most influential way that we can be potent in sharing our faith, is through sacrifice. Sacrifice. Truly giving of your own materialistic possession, of your own property, your own time, your efforts, energy, in order to best influence others and show them the love of Christ. And so we're going to be taking a look at these three components. Obviously, that first blank is authenticity, if you haven't figured it out yet, of our next section. It says, Christians, they should be the good news. Christians should be the good news before they share the good news. We have this idea of being the good news. What is the good news? I say this all the time. Why is it capitalized, good news? Anyone know?
It's the story of Jesus.
Right?
Yeah.
Euangelion is the Greek word used here for gospel, right? The good news, the good message. Good. Gelion is a messenger. Angels, we get the same word because they are messengers. Angelos, Evangelion, you kind of hear that same theme there. This is that we should be the good news. That is, we should actually be living it out. We should be authentic before we share the good news. And the good news, used in that context, I'd argue, is the gospel itself. So we should be living out our faith, the good news, what we believe, before we share the gospel good news. Now, there is diversity in the family of God. As a part of this authenticity, this idea of becoming the good news, of being the good news, there's diversity in the family of God. We need to understand that not every Christian has to be pressed into a one-size-fits-all mold. I think about whenever I was walking through this and studying this, I was thinking about we often see God as the potter, right? We are the clay, He's the potter, I'm the clay. So many songs sing about this, the Bible speaks to this. But can you name a potter? Has anybody ever tried spinning pottery before? You have? Yeah. I tried it once, and let me tell you, it was terrible. I did an awful job at trying to just make a simple bowl. But the point is even professional potters, these people that do this for a living, there's still going to be minor differences in each thing that they do. You sit down and say, I want a bowl. Could you make me a bowl? They're going to sit there, and it might be completely different than a bowl that they made yesterday. And that's the idea I want to communicate here, is that as Christians, just because we are Christians and we are in this fold, we're in the church, we're within this mindset, this religion, this denomination, does not mean that we all have to be the same exact person. In fact, we are unique. We're going to have similarities, as you'll see. That's one of the blanks. We will all have similarities. That is, we are all going to know who Christ is, His sacrifice on the cross for us, and that we can have hope and security in Him, having that faith. But also, each person is unique. I mean, to expect Sheridan to perform the same things in her faith as I will that's wrong. It's going to actually shortchange both of us if we both try to merge into one specific mold or model Christian. And that's what the world sees, right? I mean, those of you who became a Christian later on in life, I'm sure even some of us early in life, you look at a Christian and you just have this mentality that, they're all a bunch of cookie cutters, religious zealots that want to push their beliefs on anybody that comes near. And they're a bunch of do-gooders, Bible thumpers. We get all these nicknames and these derogatory remarks because they expect that every Christian must be like this. But that's not the case. In the same way that I'm as unique from another person in this room as you are from me, should be the same between Christians. Christians have amazing gifts that I will never be able to perfect or to even come close to the way that they're able to use them. I like the spotlight. I like to be on stage. If there's a microphone and it's hot, I want to be on it just talking because I'm a dork. I don't know. But that's just how I've been gifted, right? I have this desire, this ability to want to be up there. I want to be in the limelight. I want to be causing and redirecting that attention towards God. So there's a similarity that the message I want to communicate is God, but there's another person that they love serving through counseling. They want to sit down. They want to have a one-on-one time. They don't want to be in the limelight. That's the last thing they could possibly ever want to do. But they still have a ministry here that I'm not going to be able to do to the same ability, to the same effect that they will. Because we're unique. We're different. But the message is the same. They're going to counsel them towards the Lord. I'm going to be trying to point people towards the Lord. I do the magic stuff, and I try to illustrate the gospel with that. And so, yes, the message is the same. There are similarities, but we are all unique. And so to have this idea that every Christian should be a part of the same mold of it's not, we're distinguishable. We're different. Yes, we're similar, but we are different. And so I just really want to make sure that that's clear, because the second we try to fit into this idea of there's a model Christian that we should be, then we are in effect being inauthentic. Are we not? Because if I was to see that counseling a person, that is the epitome, that is the pillar of faith, is to counsel someone, and I try to force myself into that position, I'm going to do a bad job. I'm going to probably mislead that person. I'm probably going to do a disservice to my own gifts that God has given me, and it's just going to blow up. And that's not what we want. We don't desire that. And so we need to understand that authenticity comes because we're unique. We need to embrace that and break free of this mold that people expect that we have. Okay, second point. Smiling through the pain or stifling sadness and grief do not indicate spiritual maturity. Smiling through the pain or stifling sadness and grief do not indicate spiritual maturity. That is, have you all ever heard like the people that get up and they tell some fake story trying to get a handout or something like that? It happens here at the church. People will come by and they'll start trying to, they'll oh man, you won't believe it. I just broke down on gas. I promised I was just going to do it. I'm just going to get gas and I'll get back and stuff. And then you look out and their bike's sitting over here or something. You're just like, come on. That's so inauthentic. It's not genuine. But yet they might tear up. They might try to sell it for all they're worth. It's just not authentic. And the idea that in pain and suffering for Christians, true pain and suffering, doesn't mean we have your maturity is not dependent on how you're able to handle that. That is, you got to smile and quote Bible verses when you just lost a child. What? No. That's going to seem just as inauthentic as that person that's lying about trying to get something, right? It really perturbs me, for lack of a more appropriate word, but it makes me so upset whenever I hear somebody trying to take advantage of the church and it's a lie. It makes me so upset because I said, if you would just be honest, I would probably give whatever it takes. If you just be honest, if you'd be authentic. The world's looking at us and they see the same thing. That is, imagine if, well, I'll use the good illustration here. I had some family friends who had some boys that were about my age. They had 3 boys. And as the boys were about, I think they're like around 10 or 12 years old, with the youngest being around 6 or 7, the boys were playing one day while it's after Sunday afternoon actually, and one of the boys, they were down there. They're digging a tunnel in the side of a creek bed, and as two of the three boys were inside the tunnel, it collapsed on them and suffocated them. Flash forward a year later, their oldest son is killed in a car wreck, almost on the day. You're sitting here saying, God, what is going through those parents' minds? Could you imagine if they were just, God has a plan, yeah, he's going to do good, God works all things are great. Maybe in like a decade you could start saying stuff like that, but while that's going, no, they were broken up. They were grieving, and rightly so. It just tears your heart out to consider that. But you know what? As they were grieving, they tried to point towards Christ. But it's the fact that they were grieving is what made it authentic. If you think you're going to live through this entire life and you're not going to experience grief, pain, suffering, then you're going to be in for a rude awakening. Because it's coming. If you're not going through something right now, it's going to be difficult. This life will be difficult. And if you don't have an appropriate response to some of these things, then you're going to seem ingenuine. You're going to be inauthentic. When Jesus heard that his friend Lazarus had died, what did Jesus do? Anyone know? He wept. He broke down in public. He began to weep for his friend. That's genuine. That's authentic. And that's the way we should be. Just because it doesn't show spiritual maturity to stifle your sadness or to try to smile through the pain. That's just not what happens. We need to be authentic. And people will know whether or not you're authentic. It's pretty easy to pick up on, is it not? So we need to be authentic. That is, to not put on a facade. Because that's the very opposite of authentic. That's lying. That's putting up airs. And so, I'm fine. Jesus has me. Yes, he does. But it's appropriate to respond. And to this point, to take it along the same path, many Christians, they believe that we should hide our failures and cover up our mistakes, or else we'll risk driving people away from Christ. They believe that, and we know that, right? Because so many Christians in that building over there on a Sunday morning are doing exactly that. They're covering up their mistakes, saying, I don't want anybody to see this. One, because it's embarrassing. And two, if a non-believer, if somebody comes in here and sees this, they're going to say, well, I don't want that. They're a bunch of hypocrites. Look at them. They're trying to pretend like they have life all together, all figured out. If you don't pretend, then you won't be. Right? It just makes sense. We need to make sure that we aren't hiding our failures. We're not covering them up. In fact, we're told to bear one another's burdens. That's what we're called to do. We must understand that the lost world is not expecting perfection from Christians. It really isn't. What it looks like for those is that we are those who confess their faults and we seek to make things right. We confess our faults and we seek to make things right. And this all together, whenever we confess our faults, whenever we own up to our mistakes, it helps the world realize that perfection is not an expectation for them. That if I go to that church, are they going to flog me for messing up this last week? People are afraid to enter into a church because of fear of being struck by lightning or set ablaze on fire. It's outrageous. But the reason is because they have this mentality that perfection is an expectation of Christians. It's not. It's not. If it was, then nobody would be a Christian. Not even Paul. Paul says that he is the chief of all sinners. And so we need to make sure that we're not living as if perfection is an expectation. That means being transparent. That means being authentic. And that's difficult. It really is. Don't get me wrong. What we're covering in this is easy to talk about, almost impossible to live out, it seems. But I challenge you to try it. Try opening yourself up. Try giving your burdens to someone else, one of your Christian brothers and sisters that you trust, and challenge them to bear your burden. Because one, you're going to be able to be helped in whatever the trial or situation that is. But two, your brother or sister in Christ that you're trusting with, they're going to be able to grow as well. Because are they not serving you? When the lost world realizes that perfection is not an expectation, they also realize that Christians, they're just simply trying their best at living out their faith. And that's the mindset. I can get on board with that. If somebody out there that I'm witnessing to, they want to become a Christian, and they say, well, you Christians, you mess up a lot, but I can tell that you're at least trying. Awesome. That would be an amazing response. But that's not the case. Why? Because even Christians fall prey to this mindset. They believe that perfection is a requirement or an expectation. It's not. It's not. We need to get out of that mindset. We need to drive that mindset out of the church. Because as long as it stays within the church, the longer we're going to sit dormant. We got to get rid of it. So that's authenticity. Authenticity. Any comments, questions, concerns? Anybody know anybody that that's an authentic person right there? That's an authentic Christian. Somebody tell us a story. Who's somebody that you know, and how do you know that they are just authentic?
I got a buddy, he's Philip Wilson, and he's a youth minister. He met him at Falls Creek Ministry. And I would say that of all the people in my life, he's probably the one that I look up to as a spiritual person.
Awesome. And how do you know he's authentic?
He just lives the life. He walks the walk. I mean, I can tell.
Yeah. Is he perfect?
Oh, no.
Right. Right? Awesome. Thank you. Authenticity, it is. It's action. It's living out your faith and dispelling these mindsets that the world has about Christians. We're not all cookie cutter model Christians. We're not going to be perfect. We're not inauthentic in that we have no emotions, that in trials, in grief, we don't show emotion. Those are all lies. We need to get rid of them. That way, what was just said, and I saw everyone nodding their heads as we were talking about somebody authentic. That way somebody can be thinking of you if someone was asking them that about you.
I also had a buddy today tell me that the reason why you don't go to church is because he doesn't want to be a hypocrite.
Yeah, that's a big one.
I said, well, to a certain extent, we're kind of all hypocrites. The only difference is that, we've got Jesus in our heart, and we're trying.
Yeah, and that's a funny one. Is typically it's because the church is full of hypocrites. That's why I don't want to go, because I don't want to associate myself with them. But that's interesting that he don't want to go to church because he fears he'll be a hypocrite. Which I've heard this before, but it's very rare. But the thing is, it's like, if you don't have this mindset that perfectionism is expected, then what are you going to be a hypocrite of? Yeah, you're going to mess up. I'm here to tell you, if you think that anyone in this room, including me, especially me, is perfect, you're going to be disappointed. And I've said this since I first got here to Loco. I'm going to do stuff to make people upset. I'm going to do things that are going to make you so frustrated. Who knows? But the thing is if you have this mindset that you're not expecting perfection from me, that you know I'm going to mess up, and that you want to be there and help me through a struggle, through a trial, wow, imagine what God can do with that. Right? Oh, It's amazing to think about, amazing to consider. Okay, next point. We have authenticity, we have compassion, right? Compassion. Those of you who got your Bibles, let's open up to Deuteronomy chapter 15:11. Deuteronomy 15:11. Someone read it for us.
And the poor will never cease to be in the land, therefore I command you, saying, you shall freely open your hand to your brother, to your needy and poor in your land.
You should open your hand to the poor and needy, to your brother, right? And I'm just going to jump ahead to Matthew 25, verse 40. It says, truly I say to you, as you did it to one of the least of these, my brothers, you did it to me. Anybody know who was talking right there? It was Jesus, right? So Jesus is saying, hear me out. What I'm about to say this is true. As you did to one of the least of these, so also you did to me. How you treated that person, how you treated the beggar, how you treated the homeless guy, how you treated your neighbor, how you treated your own family members, is how you treated me. So is that a good thing or is it a bad thing? Well, that's for you to determine. Because if you treat poorly, then that's Christ. If you treat them well and help them, that's also Christ, right? We know the least of these. So I want you, on a scale from 1 to 10, 1 being you're a stone cold, heartless monster, to 10, that is Mother Teresa, how compassionate are you? There's an area there that you can write your response, but I want to, those of you that want to play like extreme or expert mode, you can't use the number 5. No middle of the fence. You got to go one way or another. Write down your answers. Take a moment to think about it. How compassionate do you think you are? Or how compassionate would you say you are?
I think it varies. It depends on the circumstance.
Really?
Yeah.
How so?
Well, one day I stopped at a store in Belmont on my way to work, and it was raining, not heavily, but raining. And there was a delivery man there with unloading pop. I don't remember his coat had something
Right.
about pop in containers off of his truck, and it had slid off of his dolly and scattered. And at the time, I was in a hurry,
Yeah.
late for work. I went on in the store, felt sorry for him, went on in the store, hurried back out, and got in my car. And by the time I really seriously thought about it, that I should have stopped and helped him set stuff up, I really felt bad about it, that I didn't stop and help him.
Yeah.
So it's kind of where your mindset is at the time. Going into the store, my mindset was not on helping him. It was
Right.
on getting to work. Coming out, getting in the car, my mindset had changed. I'd had time to think about it, and
Right.
and I had.
It's actually funny. That reminds me of a story I heard once of a seminary. They wanted to do a study or almost a prank even. They got, I think it was like 4 or 5 preaching major seniors. Like they were on their way out. They were going to be preachers. They were they're trained. They were ready to go out. And this is at a seminary, right? And so they were given the task to preach over the Samaritan man that helps the guy who's been beaten up and robbed and left on the side of the road. Then the Good Samaritan comes by after the priest, and everyone passed him by basically. And now a nasty, low-down Samaritan, oh my goodness, he comes and helps him out and puts him up, right? And so they're told to preach on this. And at the last minute, they are in one building expecting to preach their sermon over this to professors, and they get a call. They get a call saying, actually, we're going to be over here at this other building across campus, and you're up in 3 minutes. Like, you got 5 minutes to get over here and get going because we're ahead of schedule, we're ahead of time. Sorry about this, but we got to go. So these kids, they take off running across the seminary campus, right? And along the way, they have somebody pose as a beggar, as a homeless person, and clearly in distress, right? Like, clearly needs help, wailing out. Not a single one stopped. And you're sitting here like, wait a second, these are like the best of these are the cream of the crop, right? Why don't they stop? Why didn't they stop? Well, apparently their compassion wasn't on par. And this is a common struggle for Christians, right? It's difficult to love people sometimes. I'll be the first to admit, like, sometimes I come home after doing a camp or doing something, or and I just come home and sit down and say, I just can't stand people. Oh, this is just ridiculous. And yeah, I'll be honest. I mean, I love you all, but no, I'm just kidding. Some a little bit more so than others. You know, no, I'm just kidding. I'm teasing. But the thing is, you get this mentality that it's hard sometimes. It's a burden to keep up a level of compassion consistently. Well, I agree. In fact, actually, I think that there are 3 difficulties that may be keeping your compassion from being displayed, or maybe keeping it dormant in your life. That is, it never is expressed. It never comes out, right? And so we see here, the first one, I'd argue. Actually, before we get into this, if you rated yourself in compassion as a 6 or lower, I would argue, let's get this fixed. I think Christians, we need to be a 7 or above, at least, at a minimum. I'll admit, I put myself as a 6, so I'm with y'all. I did the same thing. So if you are 6 or lower, okay, we have a goal. We need to get rid of these next 3 things that we're going to be talking about. Those that are 7 and above, hey, you guys are doing awesome, but they're still, hey, you're not. I doubt anybody put in a 10. I don't know if Mother Teresa looked like. You watch it.
No, I did it just to see what she was saying. And she turned and she said, anybody that would put a 10 is a pompous.
There you go. Yeah, that sounds about right. I love that. It's because you got called out that you raised it. No, I'm just teasing. All right. So what are these 3 difficulties that we have to overcome in order to be more compassionate? First, you may have been raised or you currently are living in a compassionless environment. You were raised or are currently living in a compassionless environment. This could come literally from your very upbringing. We all didn't have happy-go-lucky childhoods. Some of us, I've heard people tell stories of never being hugged by their parents or never having any sort of form of love or compassion on them. And we need to understand that love begets love. Compassion breeds compassion. Mercy, it grows mercy. These things will beget one another. They'll produce one another. And so there are some of us that just had bad upbringings, to be honest. And the thing is that some of us in this room may be still living in a compassionless environment. That's tough. That's tough to consider, is it not? That there's no compassion being around you, that no one's pouring into you. I would challenge you, if you are currently in a compassionless environment, change it or move. Change it or move. Honestly, life is too short to endure through this oppression in that environment. You need to make it better or you need to get away from it. And that's the thing, is you need to make sure that you are going to a better place. Because many of us, after being abused, after being neglected, after having the opposite of these qualities ingrained in our minds, it's easy to fall back into those same places. We find ourselves climbing out just to find ourselves in the back in the bottom of it. So it's difficult, but it's not impossible. And I'd say that this is this chokes compassion. It really does. If you don't have compassion surrounding you, how do you expect to show it? You're going to run dry. It's like a plant in the desert. If it doesn't get any water, it's not going to be able to survive. So I would encourage you to make or to put yourself in an environment that has compassion, that has love, that has mercy, that has all the fruit of the Spirit. And if it doesn't have any of those, make it. Change it. You have the power to change your environment. Did you know that? You really do. And it often begins with showing compassion. So, you might have been raised or you currently are living in a compassionless environment. Number 2, second difficulty. You are living at an unhealthy pace. You are living at an unhealthy pace. You're living as if the accelerator is stuck on the car. You guys remember the Camaro I had, the old silver beast. Oh my goodness, I was driving home from school one day, and there's a hill, it's like a little double dip that goes down, and I love to just hit it as fast as I possibly could go, because you could get off the ground. It's really crazy, and I should have died several times. But I remember one time I was driving, and I go over the hills, and I'm like, oh man, that was fun. But as I'm sitting there, I realized that the engine's, I'm like, oh no, what is going on? And I freaked out. I mean, I'm not just gaining speed, I'm eating speed. I mean, the needle's just climbing, babe. Oh, I'm just hanging on, trying to keep it on the road at this point. And so I don't know what else to do, so I just kill the car engine. And whenever I do it, it locks the steering wheel, so I can't steer, so I have to turn it back on real quick, and I finally got it on and coasted to a stop. And realized that the gas pedal had got pushed underneath the carpet, and it held it there in place all the way I pedaled down. And I mean, I thought I was going to die. That was one of the scariest moments of my life. Oh my goodness. But there are a lot of us that are living just like that. You don't have control. I mean, you are flying and you don't know what to do to slow down, to get a breath. You are constantly on edge. You're constantly waiting for the next thing. You got so many plates spinning. You got to keep things in the air. It is impossible to keep up with it. I'd argue that if you're living at an unhealthy pace like that, as if the accelerator is pushed to the metal, and you can't see any kind of escape, I guarantee you that at some point, all those plates will fall. All that will end. And it's going to be difficult. Oh, it's going to hurt. And we've been there sometimes. Some of us have been there. You just get burned out, right? You were doing too much, and it literally drained you of everything. And it's a unique draining, is it not? It's not just a physical exhaustion. It's not a mental taxing. No, it's a whole entity of its own. It's a whole nother animal. And it really does. It makes you fatigued. It drains you. An unhealthy pace of life will suppress your compassion. It really will. If not only just because you are too busy. If you have too much stuff, if you're worrying about what you're going to do tomorrow, some of us, I'm sure, have already, since you walked in this door, have thought about what you need to get done tomorrow or this week. I'm sure all of us have. Whenever those thoughts pervade your mind, how do you expect to show compassion? Whenever you're late for work and somebody's sitting here, or you got to go preach across campus and to your professors, and you see a need, are you going to be able to stop, take a second, and show compassion? Or is this unhealthy lifestyle pace? Is this pace going to determine how you react? If you answered the latter, then there needs to be a change. You need to shut off the engine. Something needs to give. So we need to consciously and healthily take steps in order to slow down the pace of your life. If you're finding yourself, if that's all in your mind, if that's all what's going on, you need to figure out there needs to be a release. You need to set apart some time for yourself. You need to cut back on your hours at work. You need to stop spending so much time going out. You need to do whatever it is that's going to help you, that is both a conscious effort and a healthy effort. I mean, obviously we're not going to quit our jobs because we want more time. But it needs to be a conscientious effort on your part to make a change, to get slowed down, to give your time a chance to relax and rest. Because if you don't, then it will come down. It will come down hard. And it's going to hurt. But it'll also stifle your compassion. So we see that you might be in a compassionless environment. You might be living at an unhealthy pace. Or third, we need to watch how you give compassion. This is very similar to what we just spoke about. Being burned out. One of the biggest problems that they teach you in college and seminary when you're training to be a pastor is to not sign up for more than what you're able or what you're capable of. And I can't remember, there are statistics out there that are just terrible, that are surprising, of how many ministers drop out of ministry to never return simply because they burned themselves out. They signed up for too much at once. They couldn't do it. This happens to everyone, not just ministers. We have jobs, we have families, we have outside engagements, we have our families, extended families that we have to keep up with, we have friends, we have a church, we have a ministry. How are we supposed to be able to keep up with it? It seems impossible. You need to make sure that you are being poured into. Because if you pour out compassion, you can actually, in the reading, if you read Becoming a Contagious Christian, they pose this as saying there are some who give too much compassion. And at first you're like, wait a second, that's the goal, right? Well, not if you're not getting anything poured into yourself. Picture a picture. I'll get it. Here, if I was to take a pitcher and I was to pour it out and say water some plants, some flowers here or something like that, and I use up all the water, it's empty. I set it down. Then there's another little flower here that I didn't see, and it's starting to wilt. It's dirt. It's dry. It's going to need some water. I take the pitcher, I turn it over. It's just like a drop. Same happens with us. Unless you are being poured into, you cannot pour out of. Hear me? If you're not being poured into, you can't pour yourself out. And that's the thing. We need to make sure that we are being poured into. Well, how do you get poured into? How do you think we get poured into?
Jesus.
That's a good Sunday school answer. It covers a lot, but let's get a little more specific, right?
The Holy Spirit.
Coming to church.
Church, that's a good one.
Reading our Bible.
Reading our Bible, great. Prayer.
I think just people helping you do something too instead of doing it yourself.
Yeah, bearing others' burdens, even in ministry. I mean, just having help and support.
Fellowship.
Fellowship, yeah.
What's your answer?
Hey, these are all great. These are all right. This is all right. And see, that's the thing is, we just named 6 ways of pouring into ourselves like that. I'd argue that there are a myriad of ways that we can be poured into. But are we actually doing it? That's the difficulty, is actually doing it, right? I mean, don't tell anybody else this, but as the pastor, it's difficult to go to church, is it not? You got to get the kids ready. You got to get everybody fed. You got to get your teeth brushed. I hope you're taking a shower. You got to get all gussied up, and then you got to drive out there. You got to show up, and now there's a couple hours gone by. It seems like it's a drag. It seems like it's going to be so difficult, and it is difficult. But you know what? When you get there, are you not filled? Does it not make it worth it? If it's not worth it to come to church, then you might be doing something wrong. Because we should be getting something out of it. I'm not saying that I can preach sermons that are going to bless your socks off every Sunday or anything like that, but just being around our fellow Christians, that's going to pour into us. I mean, it's awesome to hear about prayer requests. I mean, Debbie Neighbors, I got to hear how she's doing and stuff. And then, talking about Eddie, getting to hear about how he's doing and stuff like. It's good to be up and keep up with one another, And it pours into me. And it enables me throughout the rest of the week to say, hey, yeah, that was really cool getting to hear how my prayers are affecting somebody, or, just to have such good friends to surround myself with, And so we need to make sure that we are pouring into ourselves before we're pouring out. And we need to balance caring for others with caring for yourself. We need to balance that. There is a balance. And to this point, also, we are not meant to be reservoirs. So that's where the picture illustration ends, is just with that. But we're not meant to be reservoirs of God's and others' compassion or love. Instead, we're supposed to be conduits. Conduits. We need to accept that compassion, that love, that mercy, and we need to instantaneously redirect it outwards. Just like electricity. You hit a light switch, as soon as it gets the power, it goes out. Right? That's the way we should be. Because imagine if you were to try to store up compassion, to store up love. I don't know about you, but if I met somebody like that every time I tried to help them along or do something with them and then see them not do anything with that, I would probably stop. Just because it's disheartening to see. Right? It reminds me of during the Exodus. You all remember the manna that would show up, this bread that they'd be able to collect and make, they'd be able to basically survive off of, that was provided by God. What happens if you tried to store some?
It would rot.
It would spoil. It would rot, right? Yeah. I think the same thing happens with compassion. If you don't immediately use it, just like if you don't immediately use this manna and bake it into bread to eat and for that day, then it's going to rot. It's going to spoil. And it'll be meaningless. If you're storing up compassion, if you're just accepting mercy, love, joy, all these things, and you're just keeping it to yourself, it feels good for a second, but eventually you're going to want more. And everything that you had will be rotten and gone. We need to make sure that we are not trying to store it up. We're not a reservoir, but rather conduits. So what do you believe may be hindering your compassion?
Past experiences.
Past experiences? Okay.
Crazy train of time and work.
Trying to keep time, that balance?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Like Mom was saying earlier, that sometimes it's hard to, depending on the situation. I have an example at work. I have a guy that is very needy and wants everything. He will go behind people's back and steal what he wants. He is a very selfish child that was never made to grow up. It's hard for me to have compassion for him because he doesn't want to do any better. He doesn't want to improve. He just wants to keep accepting everything like, I can get whatever I want, it's no big deal. And so for me, that hinders my compassion toward him, as well as his father, because that's part of the reasons.
Interesting. What I want you to do is I want you to take a moment and of those three categories, what do you think is most hindering your compassion right now? Don't have to say it out loud. Just write it down there in that blank. What do you believe may be hindering your compassion of those three? Do you believe it's because you're in a compassionless environment? Is it because that you think that maybe your life is going at an unhealthy pace? Things are just too hectic? Or do you think it's on how you give compassion? That is that you're not pouring into yourself. Which of those three do you think it is? And write it down. Okay. So, what we're going to do, we're going to read those aloud. I'm just kidding. Scared you. Okay, I'm just teasing. All right. Third point. So we looked at authenticity, right? That's living out, being the good news before we share the good news. Having compassion, what we just saw, how we've been commanded in the scriptures to be compassionate towards others, and how to overcome the three most probably prominent difficulties facing our compassion and showing compassion. Now we're going to move on to sacrifice. Sacrifice. It's a costly action for the good of another will stay with them forever. A costly action for the good of another will stay with them forever. Heard a story of a missionary went out to a village out in the middle of nowhere, and as they're sitting there, these two young adults, they invited them to have dinner with them. So they began, kind of scrounging around the hut that they lived in, trying to get the food prepared and stuff like that. And upon seeing the reserves in their cabinet space, or pantry space, I guess, and also the faces of their two children who were watching intently the cupboards there, they realized that this wasn't just out of their generosity. This was out of their necessities that they were supplying this meal for these two missionary men. And they just, this broke their hearts. These kids, their meal tomorrow may have just been served to these two missionaries who didn't need it. And they sat there and they ate it, and they felt awful. They felt terrible. They said, let us repay you. Let us give you some money to buy some supplies for what we've eaten. Trying to give them some money. The young couple refused it and would not take it, no matter what they did, and sent them on their way. I'm sure in your mind you can imagine that's going to stick with you, is it not? Why do you think that that's such a big thing? Why do you think that's going to stick with him for the rest of his life?
Because it was a sacrifice.
It was. It was a sacrifice. They didn't give out of their excess. They didn't give out of their, their 401k they got sitting around. They didn't give out of their checkings account, their savings account. They gave out of what was in their own home. They gave out of what was required for them to live. And so it stood out. A costly action for the good of another will stay with them forever. I would argue, these first two, authenticity, it may not be noticed. People, they might not notice that you're authentic. And compassion, they might see compassion as having an ulterior motive that's driving it, that you're trying to get something out of them. But that's why you're being nice. But you know what? If you sit down and have a costly action that it costs you something for the good of another person, putting their material needs before yourself, it's going to stick with them. They're going to sit there saying, why on earth did that person do that? That doesn't make any sense. What did they have to gain? Why did, in fact, they actually lost? Why? We need to sacrifice in order to have high potency. There are an infinite amount of ways that we can sacrifice for others, but there are three that I believe stands above the rest. The first is time. Bill writes in his book, most of us grossly underestimate the effect we could have on people's eternities if we would take the time to schedule a breakfast or lunch with lost people in our sphere of influence. That's all it takes. Can you believe it? It's just literally taking some time to sit down with another. It doesn't have to be long either. That's the cool thing. Here in the coming months, we're going to be starting up our Link ministry. And in our Link ministry, we'll be going to the Meridian Nursing Home. And it'll be an hour a week, maybe. If not, it could even be less. We're still trying to figure out the scheduling and all that. But an hour a week. But you know what? That's going to stick with them people. Why? Because it's taking up my time. What's the most valuable resource in this world? Time, right? Time is money. If you spend the time at your job doing work, then you'll get paid. And so the most important thing for the world today, money, is received. It's a byproduct of time, giving of your time. And so your time is critically important, crucial to helping others see your faith is genuine, to see compassion, to see a sacrifice that will stick with them. The second, pretty predictable, but it's underused, is money. Time is money. Money is time. Money. In order to truly surprise the lost world that so desperately seeks after money and material goods, put another person's material needs before your own. It'll turn them on the head. They won't know what to do with that. Say, wait a second. This doesn't make sense. Doesn't compute. Some of the people that we are able to help through our ministry, through the oil fund, the outreach and Loco fund that we have, our benevolence fund, it's incredible to see the appreciation, the genuine surprise of, wait a second, there's no catch? We don't owe you anything? No. We just want to show you that we love you. And how incredible it is that we can do that simply by giving $1 a week. That's awesome. Wow. Which, by the way, if anyone has any ideas for outreach, we actually are very much endowed as of right now with the oil fund. So talk to me, and we'll see if we can do a couple more projects here in the future. So anyways, but the key is that this monetary investment that we have in this life, the opportunities that you're faced with where you're able to give monetarily to someone else, will directly be converted into heavenly treasure. Think about that. Isn't that cool? I can have earthly treasure, and I can have it converted just as if I had US dollars to euros into heavenly treasure. And the way you do that is by sacrificing it. It's by giving it. And giving it freely. And all throughout the scriptures, it talks about how we are to give of our time and our efforts and our energies. Also our money. When you give as if your right hand doesn't know what your left is doing. That's crazy. But that's the way it should be. Because it's done out of love. It's done out of that compassion that we talked about. And it's authentic. If you're sacrificing like that, imagine the response you'll get. And so I strongly encourage you to consider having a monetary investment in another's life so that it can be directly converted into heavenly treasures. The third and final is consistency. Consistency. Yeah, I know time and money, those are actual, like, kind of measurable things, but consistency, I'd argue, although intangible as it is, sometimes it's going to take people seeing you live out your faith consistently before they'll see that it's authentic. And the reason that this is under a sacrifice and not under compassion or under authenticity is because it is a sacrifice to live consistently, is it not? That's difficult. It's difficult to actually live out your faith 100% of the time for days, weeks, months, years. It's exhausting. It's difficult. It's tough. But it's a sacrifice. If it's easy, then everyone would be doing it. Right? We've heard that saying. Some people need to see a Christian live out their faith for an extended amount of time before they're convinced that it's not a scam or a hoax. They need to see it for themselves. They need to see it over the long haul. And we need to understand that we're not in a sprint. We're in a marathon. We're in a marathon, not a sprint. So many Christians, we come to church and we think, oh, well, I'm just going to hit up every single ministry I could possibly do, and we're gearing up for a sprint. And then halfway through the week, we realize that we burned up all of our energy, and now we're huffing and puffing and about to pass out and have to bow out of the race. When really we're in a marathon and we didn't even make it past the starting line, it seems. To those outside the church, to those that aren't Christians, that aren't believers, that haven't trusted Christ, they want to know that you truly believe it. And sometimes it's going to take some people a long time, especially a demographic that this will especially come from is your family and friends. Why? Because they know you. They know that you went on the Atkins diet and said, this is the fix that I've been looking for, and then you know, a couple months later you're off it and on to the next thing. Or, oh, I figured it out. This is what I was missing. It was jiu-jitsu. I'm going to start doing classes 3 times a week. That's going to fix it. No, it's not there. You dropped out of that after a month. Whatever it may be, they've seen you. And so when you say, I'm a Christian, Jesus is what I've been needing this whole time, it's been accumulating towards this. They're going to have to see you actually living it out for the long haul before they believe it's genuine, before they believe it's authentic. And because of that, this is a sacrifice. It's difficult, but necessary. So, this week, we discussed high potency and how to have high potency. 3 ways are authenticity, compassion, and sacrifice. If you can grow in these 3 areas, then your potency will grow. I would challenge you. In here we wrote, under the compassion, what's hindering your compassion? I challenge you to work on that. I want you to think of an actual practical way you can help show more compassion. Figure out what it is and do it this week. Okay? That's your challenge. It's going to be tough, but it's good. So, as you're still in this mindset, maybe go home, jot it down what you want to do, what change you need to make in order to be more compassionate, what one of these 3 or whatever it is that's causing this problem, and a practical step or steps to rid that difficulty and do it. Okay? It's going to be tough. It's going to be difficult, but it's going to be worth it. Guarantee it. All right. Who wants to close us in a word of prayer? Someone hasn't done it yet.
Most gracious Heavenly Father, I'm thankful for those that were able to be here tonight and listen to the message that you prepared and laid on Zach's heart to bring to us. And I pray that you will give us understanding and help us to go out this week and work on our compassion, Lord. Work through us to show us the needs that we need to act on. I pray that you will help us live out our faith, Lord, and be strong and let others see Jesus in us. And I just pray, I pray for those that were watching tonight that you will lay on their heart a message that they can seek you through this also. Lord, I just pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. All right. Thanks for being here.